I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're going to preview the USMNT's upcoming friendly against Slovenia this Saturday, January 20th. The match takes place during the USMNT's annual January camp, which traditionally includes a roster of young up-and-comers, and this year's roster looks no different. To help me preview the match on Saturday, I've invited Ryan Tolmich to join the show. Ryan is the American soccer correspondent for Goal. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on. Excited to kind of get started and kind of kickstart 2024. And holidays are kind of behind us, and now we're kind of gearing up for really the start of the American soccer season. So really excited to dive into it.
Yeah, we've had a couple months off with no matches for the USMNT, so it's going to be great to see them back in action. Let's start by talking about the roster. The roster came out, I believe, last week. It was originally 25 players. Now it's down to 23 because a couple of people have departed. But what were your thoughts on the roster when it came out? What stood out to you?
Yeah, the initial impression was slightly surprised. Just because there were so many familiar faces left off of it. You know what you're signing up for with January camp, and that it is going to be a certain type of squad, one that's really MLS based, maybe with a few European guys who are out of their club. But when you look at the roster, a lot of the familiar faces were left off. A lot of the guys that you would say are the ones that have kind of been the MLS guys aren't here. There's no Walker Zimmerman. He's dealing with an injury. No Jesus Ferreira. You're looking at no Aaron Long, no Christian Roldan. A lot of these guys who've kind of been part of this team for a while. And then you look at the guys who are included, and it's a lot of guys with little to no national team experience aside from, maybe a handful of guys. So it is a good chance to see some new faces. We're at a point in the cycle where between the Olympics and Nations League and Copa America, it's important to kind of expand the player pool and see some of these guys and see where they kind of fit into the picture. But yeah, overall, it's a very different kind of even January camp roster, which is already a different kind of roster. So it should be an interesting one just because it's missing so many of the guys that we're so used to seeing in these types of games.
Yeah, I expected to, not recognize some of the players, on the roster because it is a January camp, but I was even surprised at just how many players I really didn't know hardly anything or nothing about, when this roster came out. A couple notes on the roster, completely MLS based, all players, 15 players are earning their first call up. 13 players age eligible for the 2024 Olympic Games, which, I've heard a lot of people say that this camp should be kind of a U23 camp to kind of get ready for the Olympics. So maybe that's why there's so many new names. But yeah, there's a bunch of names that I didn't recognize. Of the players that are on there, who's some of the players that you're most excited to watch if they get some game time?
So like you said, I'm kind of looking at this camp, like you said, as sort of Olympic prep, in that, there's only a few of these guys. I'm thinking Miles Robinson, Greg Berhalter, name dropped Shaq Moore as the guy that could feature this summer. Other than that, there aren't many guys that are really kind of pushing for those spots. Maybe Drake Callender is someone that could be on as the second or third goalkeeper going forward. But a lot of these guys are guys that are really pushing for Olympic spots. So looking at that, what are the guys that are going to kind of be there? So looking at that, you have the left backs. You have John Tolkin and Caleb Wiley, who are two guys that very well could be important players at that line. Looking at Caleb Wiley, he had his breakout year last year and started to kind of come through as someone who could play anywhere up and down that left side. So he's one. John Tolkin, with the Red Bulls, had an incredible season last year. I think of stepping up and having the heart to take that penalty to put them into the playoffs. And that's the kind of guy you want on those Olympic rosters, someone with a little bit of fire to him. So he's someone that you're looking at. Aiden Morris, fresh off MLS Cup, is a guy that's worth watching, just as someone that could make a difference and give an option in the midfield. And then for me, I think the two that I'm most excited to see, I know I named a few guys there, but Diego Luna, I know Diego Luna splits some opinion for some people. I have Diego Luna stock because he is extremely exciting to watch, and he's the type of player that you don't often see come through. He does a lot of fun things. He's a fun player. He adds some skill and some sauce to the game, so I kind of want to see how that translates to playing in this level. And then the other one's Duncan McGuire, who's someone that, if the Orlando City striker system has been, on overdrive ever since they've arrived in MLS, when you think of the progress that they've made in bringing in strikers and developing them. So, yeah, interested to see how those guys do. But, yeah, overall, just which young guys are going to be the ones to step up. And there's a whole bunch of them. I named a few, but there's a lot of guys in there that could really step up and really boost their stock.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of the guys I'm especially interested to watch. Two of them in particular, John Tolkien and Aiden Morris. These are guys. When you talk to people who cover MLS really closely and are big fans of MLS, these are two young guys. They're always saying that they think have what it takes to eventually break into the USMNT senior team and do well. We've seen them called in, several times. I think they were both called in the Gold Cup. I think they were both in the January camp last year. I haven't really seen anything from them yet when they have the USMNT uniform on. I haven't seen them make, a huge impact, in the game. So it doesn't seem like they've been able to make that transition from, standing out in MLS to, really standing out in a USMNT uniform. So I'm excited to see if one of them can kind of finally take that next step. I mean, what's your thoughts on those two? And if you agree with me that they haven't stood out or if you think that they already have kind of proven themselves.
Yeah, so starting with Tolkien, I am a big John Tolkien fan. I think he has both the skill set and the mentality to kind of contribute to the national team going forward. And a lot of that's going to kind of depend on how he develops in the next year or two. Does he stay in MLS? Does he go to Europe? How does he kind of develop as a player? But when you look at the raw basics of it, he has a lot of the things that I think you're looking for, starting with the mentality. A little bit of a selfish plug here, but I did an interview with him last year where just kind of figuring out who he was as a person, because he's an interesting character, with the hair. He's obsessed with Wii golf. He says when he retires, he wants to live off the land and just live off fishing. And this is, he's an interesting character. But aside from that, he's a player that when he gets on the field doesn't play with any fear and doesn't play like he's afraid of anything. So, and I think that's important for young players. You want to see a guy that one is fearless, but also does understand that there are some aspects of this game that you're not ready for. It's a tough balance, and I think he's done good with that. And then Morris, like you said, we've gotten a few glimpses of him. Hasn't always looked great necessarily, but his stock is obviously high after a great run with the Crew. The midfield right now is a tough spot to break into, just because there's so many places that are kind of filled. When you look at the MMA midfield and Gio Reyna and Luca De La Torre, there's so many guys fighting for minutes there. Where at left back it's a little bit thinner behind Anthony Robinson and maybe Christopher Lund. But when you look at that, Tolkien has a bit of an easier path. But yeah, Morris, this seems like this year is going to be a big one for him to kind of determine what his national team future is going to look like, and it starts with this January camp. So it'll be interesting to see if he could play himself into the picture for whatever comes down the line. Probably not Copa America, but we still got a long way to the World Cup, so it could be someone to watch on the road to that.
Yeah, Duncan McGuire's another guy you mentioned. I know he just had an incredible kind of breakout season in MLS. I actually haven't watched him play that much. I haven't seen that many Orlando matches, so I'm just excited to kind of get a good look at him. I mean, how high are you on him, and how seriously do you think he can compete for, a striker position on, I guess, the senior team or even the Olympics team?
Yeah, I don't know what they have in the water there in Orlando with their strikers, but it seems like every single time they get a young guy in, they're immediately ready. I think back to Kyle Larin, who came in and lit the league on fire before going to Europe. Daryl DK, came in, didn't last long in MLS before he went to Europe, and there's already rumors going on with Duncan McGuire. So yeah, whatever they're doing in Orlando with strikers, man, you want to get drafted by those guys. But yeah, like you said, just a real breakout season. Obviously in that rookie year, he comes in and it's just absolutely, immediately one of the best strikers in the league, and that's impressive. But yeah, still you want to see how he fits in this environment, because there's levels to this. There's the jump from college to MLS, and then there's the jump from MLS to the national team level. So where does he kind of fit in that jump? There's so many guys, DK, I just mentioned, he's a guy that's fighting for striker minutes now that he's healthy. Haji Wright, Josh Sargent, obviously Pepe Balogun, Jesus Ferreira, there's so many guys fighting those striker minutes, and there's still really a long time to decide. And striker is one of those positions where if someone gets hot, they could play themselves into something real quick. So, with Duncan McGuire, you want to see how he handles this first opportunity and then how he kind of builds on it going forward, because there's a lot of reason to be excited about the trajectory of him just based on kind of what we've already seen from guys that Orlando has put their faith in.
Yeah. Yeah, really hoping he gets a start on Sunday, because I just really excited to see what he can do. Let me ask you about a couple of guys that were called into camp and some recent transfer news about them. It kind of touches on a theme we've been seeing in these last couple of weeks, but Miles Robinson decided to stay in MLS and go to Cincinnati, and then Cade Cowell has left camp due to a impending move to Chivas. I don't know if that's official yet, but certainly appears to be heading that direction. We could throw in Brandon Vasquez as well. He wasn't called into this camp, but he decided to transfer to Liga MX at Monterrey. So, what's your take on all? These are three guys I would have said I was pretty confident would go to Europe, for their next move. What's your take on this trend of all these players not going to Europe?
So yeah, it's one of those things where there's sort of two different perspectives to it, and there's the soccer perspective and the life perspective. And that from the soccer perspective, yes, ideally you want every single player pushing to Europe and doing their thing and developing in those hard, grinding it out systems where they have to work their way up and continue to improve all the way. But that really does overlook the life aspect of it. And you got to remember at the end of the day that these guys are people, and they are people with families and decisions and responsibilities, and sometimes that doesn't align necessarily with go to Europe and make the best of your soccer career that way. So, I think of someone like Miles Robinson, and I saw he spoke the other day, and he was saying how, financially no one in Europe was coming close to FC Cincinnati. And in that aspect, if I put this on, say anybody else's job, and you said one company's offering you more money and another company, and the other company you're going to have to work harder and it's going to be more difficult, I think you would go, you know what, I'm going to take care of my family, take the money, and continue to do things at the level that I'm used to. It's tough. And obviously there are people who are upset by that, and I understand that, us, from outside of the bubble are always going to be like, yeah, push yourself, do this. But at the end of the day, we're not necessarily the ones living that. So if someone like Miles Robinson wants to continue to dominate in MLS, where there is still a window for him to get into the national team, the margin for error has shrunk a little bit, but he's still someone that should get into the national team if he continues to perform well. If he wants to stay here, stay closer to his family, make a bit more money, continue to compete at a high level, maybe establish himself as one of the best to ever play in MLS at the position, that's a decision he made, and I don't begrudge him for it. And the same thing for Cade Cowell and Brandon Vasquez. Those guys obviously both have, roots, they have family, they have, situations that maybe, made themselves want to do that. And it's not like they're stepping into environments that are going to be easy. Anyone who follows Mexican soccer knows that it's an absolute mess when things go wrong. If a player is not performing, they will know. So for people to say that they won't be tested or they won't, deal with adversity in Mexico just tells me you don't follow Mexican soccer, because it might be worse than anything they'd be facing in Europe. So yeah, it's a different type of challenge for those guys. I look, if they go through, and especially with Brandon Vasquez as a striker, if he goes in and he's scoring 10, 15 goals, you're not going to keep him out. So yeah, like you said, it's a personal decision, and you just got to hope that they made the right one for them.
Yeah, they're going to have a lot of eyes on them in Liga MX, a lot of pressure. And, I think Miles Robinson, he left himself and out. He's I think, committed to a one-year deal with an option for year two. And so his decision has made a little bit more sense to me. I'm thinking, well, what if he went to Europe this year, and during this second half of the European season, it takes him a while to break into whichever team he's with. He's not getting playing time, and then therefore he's likely to get left off of the Copa America squad, So maybe he's thinking about playing time ahead of that. And then after Copa America, you have a little bit more cushion between, the World Cup, and maybe he has some time to get over to Europe and get a little bit more settled. But yeah, you got to, from a fan's perspective, maybe I was a little disappointed because I just wanted to see those guys in Europe and see what they could do. But I definitely understand these are like personal decisions.
Yeah, of course. You want to see Miles Robinson's a guy that we've seen dominate MLS since he kind of came in. Obviously the injury set him back a bit, but he's a guy that, has proven how good he is at this level. And of course you want to see if he can play in the Champions League or the Europa League or the Premier League or whatever, wherever he would have ended up. But At the end of the day, like you said, it's a decision you have to make, and you have to weigh different factors. And like I said, it's not a death blow to any player's career to stay in MLS. We know that. The margin of error just shrinks. For Miles now, he's a guy that is going to have to be a Defender of the Year caliber player if he wants to start for the national team. And I'm sure he knows that challenge going into it. But that's kind of the bar that's now set for him now that he has decided to stay back. Can he do that? Absolutely. Like he's been proving for years that he can play at that level. And if he stays at that level, you're not going to keep him off this team. But like I said, it's a little bit less margin for error because he's not in Europe. If a guy's in Europe, like you said, if he's struggling a little bit, maybe go, all right, we'll bring him in. You think of Chris Richards, who hasn't gotten as much playing time until recently, but you're bringing him in because he's playing at a high level. But for Miles now, it's the bar is where it is. He's got to be one of the best defenders in MLS, and if he isn't, then this national team thing is kind of going to go past him. But he has every ability to keep doing that. And at his age and the situation he's in Cincinnati, where he's joining a really, really good team, it's up to him to now prove that the decision is the best one for him on and off the field.
Yeah. And, I'm feeling pretty sure we'll likely see Miles in the starting lineup on Sunday. Let's talk about the actual match itself. When those lineups come out, when the match gets underway, what are some of the first things you're going to be, looking for? What do you want to see when that match kicks off?
Yeah, so the first thing is that realistically, this result matters absolutely zero. We are looking at the micro and not the macro here. You are looking at individual players and how they perform, and that's about it. These guys, most of them, almost all of them, have never played together. So expecting them to be a cohesive unit is probably a lot to ask. Many of them will be making their first cap, so they'll be dealing with some nerves. A lot of them will be in preseason form. A lot of these guys have not played since October, November, because of the way the MLS season goes. So none of these guys will have been playing games in the last 3 months. So I do not expect prime Barcelona to step on the field in a United States jersey. So for me, what I'm looking at is which few guys seem to rise to the challenge and make an impact and which guys don't. So like I said, with Miles is probably going to start. You probably know what you're going to get out of him. Pretty safe. Shaq Moore is a guy that, Greg Berhalter name dropped as someone that could still be a backup. So you would assume he's going to get minutes. We're going to get from him. But other than from those two, like when you look at the rest of the squad, there's a lot of zeros next to people's names. So let's see what those guys with the zero caps can step in and do. Can they be guys that play themselves into bigger minutes? So like I said, it's not necessarily going to be looking at, how did this guy combine with this guy? It's going to be, did this guy show the mentality and the effort and the positional awareness or whatever that is kind of needed to add them to the pool going forward, because this is the point where we're kind of re-expanding the pool before shrinking it down over the next few years until we zero in on the World Cup roster. But we're now in the expanding phase. So which of these guys can kind of be a part of that phase?
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really exciting to see who can get a big goal, big assist, just make a standout play on the field, and maybe even a negative, way as well. Hopefully, we'll see as many positive ones as possible. But when it comes to somebody standing out, do you think there's anybody on this roster that could have such a good match or impress so much that they could put themselves in a realistic position to get called up for the Nations League finals in March, which would be the next time that let's call it the senior A team, gets together? I mean, is that reasonable to think that somebody could, not counting the people like Miles Robinson that we know is going to be there, but some of these unproven guys? Is it realistic to think any of them could stand out that much?
Not many. There's a few, realistically, like you said, Miles and Shaq. Maybe someone like James Sands because of the versatility. He's someone that we've all kind of been waiting to figure out what position he'll play at the national team level. He's a guy who offers some options, so he's someone, based on availability and injuries, that could be helpful. We already mentioned Tolkien as Wiley as guys that are probably almost certainly more Olympic focused, but guys to keep an eye on. For me, the position that I'm really looking at is the goalkeepers, because those are the ones that could kind of play their way into something, because really the goalkeeper position is a little bit dire right now. You look at the way it is right now, Matt Turner is, struggling a little bit, but he's still the guy. Zach Steffen just came home, so be interesting to see how he does with Colorado. Ethan Horvath's not playing. Gago Slonita's a little young, but maybe it's time to usher him in, and we'll figure out what goes on from there. But for the three guys in this camp, they should be looking at it as realistically, like, there are spots there. They could play their way into a second or third spot. So, they might not be the starter anytime soon with Turner, but these are guys that could realistically get, the second or third goalkeeper spot in the Copa America. So there's something there for him at the end of it.
Yeah. Tolkien's a guy that I'm just so interested in, and left back is this maybe saying it's the position of weakness.
It's a boogie position for a while.
Yeah.
It's been a tough one for a while.
It seems there's a big drop off, between Anthony Robinson and the next guy, and so you've seen Greg bring in, Christopher Lund. You've seen DeJuan Jones come into camp. It just seems like a position that they're still kind of not set on, that he's still kind of experimenting with, and so. Tolkien is a guy that I feel like if he puts in a really strong performance, I don't know if he gets himself into the March camp, but maybe he starts to get himself into that conversation, a little bit more, going forward. And then, Diego Luna, I think he's just a guy that brings such a unique skill set to the table that if he impresses as well, that's just another positive check mark next to him where you're like, do we need to bring in a guy like this? He just gets himself in that conversation, a little bit further. So that's some guys we're interested in keeping an eye on. Let's talk about our opponent though, Slovenia. So what do you know about the Slovenian national team?
So what I know about it is that it is a team that's even less experienced than the U.S. You look at the total caps on that roster, I believe it's less than 40 for every guy on there. So there are a bunch of guys who are doing the exact same thing as what the U.S. guys are doing here. It's a lot of domestic-based guys that are looking to play their way into contending and playing in these Euro qualifiers going forward. So a lot of them are going to have the same mentalities, whether it's nerves, whether it's excitement, whether it's maybe for a few a little desperation to kind of play their way into this. But yeah, it's a team that's in the same spot, which is interesting because it's going to be a lot of guys that are going through the same thing. So that does add a little bit of balance and excitement to the game. But yeah, it's realistically the level, based on that, it should be somewhat even. These matches are always a little bit tough to predict because the U.S. is always kind of in preseason form. So it's always a little bit tough. But yeah, it seems like the right type of opponent that you would want this group playing to kind of see what their level is going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the Slovenia national team. When you look at it as a program, that's one thing. But then you look at the team they're bringing into this camp, it's a totally different thing. Just like it is for this U.S. I mean, I dug up a little bit of information on Slovenia's team just because I'm curious about their program. I mean, they've qualified twice for the World Cup, once in 2002, once in 2010. They've qualified twice for the Euros, once in 2000, and they are in the 2024 Euros, so they'll be playing. They've qualified and are playing in that competition. They have some top players playing throughout Europe. Their goalkeeper, I'm probably not going to pronounce his name right, Jan Oblak, is a goalkeeper for Atletico Madrid in La Liga. They have Kevin Campbell, Benjamin Sesko that play for RB Leipzig. So they have some players that are playing in top leagues in Europe. But yeah, the team that they're bringing in is a lot different. I counted 17 different players on their roster with 0 caps, and so we're not going to see that first level team from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I said, it's an inexperienced group that'll all be in the same level of mindset as the U.S. So that's what makes these games a little bit fun for both sides. I'm sure back in Slovenia they're having similar discussions that we're having now, trying to figure out if any of these guys could play their way into the Euros. So it's like I said, it should be a good balanced game, and we'll just have to see how these U.S. players handle it, what the fitness and the excitement and the inexperience and kind of all that rolled into one.
Yeah, it should be a spirited game with a lot of players on the field, playing for a future spot on their respective teams.
Absolutely.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being on the show. I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at Ryan Tolmich, and also to your work at Goal. Before I let you go, any final thoughts you'd like to share about the match or really anything else?
Yeah, I'm just excited to get back into the swing of things. It feels like it's been a while where the focus has all been on Europe, and now the process of building back into American soccer is good again. I'm really excited for this year in general with everything going on with the national team from Copa America, Nations League, Olympics, everything going on. The women's national team going into the Olympics, Inter Miami and MLS, Gotham building a super team in NWSL. There's just so much going on, and now that the holidays are a little behind us, it's time to kind of dive in. So, yeah, this should be the start of what should be a fun and crazy year in American soccer, even by American soccer standards. So, just glad to be back at it.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to 2024 and what's in store for U.S. soccer for a while now, and it's great that is finally here. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a fellow USMNT fan. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.